to introduce Dr. Wang Yufei. Dr. Wang is a business expert and also a lecturer at Vilnius University Business School. His research focuses on human behavior, culture, society, and sustainability. Yeah. And he has written extensively in leading international academic journals. With his professional experience in both in China, in the United States, and Europe, he really brings a very unique cross-cultural perspective to his research. And today, he will offer us a truly engaging and fresh way to look at Chinese history through the lens of management and leadership. So please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Wang Yufei.
Thank you, Vilma. The first time I came to Confucius Institute here was last December, and I came here, I think it's my 5th or even 6th time. So every time I come here, I feel like it's like home. Wherever I see the Latin, wherever I see like the portrait of the some Chinese guy up on the wall, it's like home. Okay, anyway, first of all, thank you all for coming to today's public lecture on Imperial CEOs of Chinese history. All right, let me start with a question. How many of you, okay, raise your hand if you ever had a terrible boss? Me too. Okay, and you might be thinking, how did this person even get this job, right? What were they thinking? So this exact question came up in more than 2,000 years of Chinese history when we look at over 500 emperors. Okay. So how did this person get a job? This question came up a lot because it's a problem that with dynasties, because for emperors, you don't get interviewed for the job. You're just born to it, right? So tonight we are going to meet 6 emperors and 6 leadership case studies. Okay, and by the end you might be grateful for your bad bosses. Okay, you might think they are relatively not that bad. So now I admit that calling emperor CEOs is a slightly provocative framing some historians might frown upon. Okay, they say that CEOs are not emperors. Okay, it's true, and they are right in many ways. We don't elect an emperor. Okay, they don't have shareholders. They have citizens. They have subjects. But stick with me for the moment, because if you think what really a CEO does is set strategies, right, for the country or for the company. It allocates resources around from department to department. It hire and fire talent. It manages crisis, right? And ultimately, they are the one who should take responsibility when things go wrong. Okay, so that's exactly what these 6 people did. They did on a slightly larger scale, not in a company, but on a country that have millions of inhabitants. So why did I choose this topic? There are 2 reasons. First, China's imperial history is long. All right. It's really long. We are talking about over 2,000 years of imperial ruling, of this institutional memory engraved in our Chinese mind. This 2,000 years of leaders trying to figure out, how do I keep the organization together? You know, how do I balance the power? Or how do I motivate people to work for me, for my country? It's not history, it's a data set. And secondly, these people are humans. They are not books. They are not statues. They are the people who love and hate. And they made terrible decisions. And some of them made awesome decisions. They were also had a moment they felt scared, and some of them were arrogant, and some of them felt lonely. Right? These are true stories. The more we study them, the more I realize that they are not just Chinese stories. It's basically a human story. So now we're gonna have very limited time tonight, which means we cannot cover everyone. Right? We cannot cover 525 of them. So we chosen 6, and here's the thing that I didn't choose them because they were the best, not because they were the famous. It's because that each one represents a core leadership challenge that every leader could potentially face. So 6 people, 6 lessons. So here we are. We have 6 board members. Okay. Now you will notice that I've given them each of them a role. Okay, I assign a role to every one of them. It's about, okay, this is more than job title. Okay, these titles capture something very essential about what each leader was trying to do, and whether if they succeeded or they failed. So think of this as a board of directors. You might go to them and consult before you launch a big project. Okay? Except instead of retired executives from the Fortune 500 companies, you are having these advisors come up with 2,000 years of experience, and they wear much better Imperial clothing. So a real board of directors has one job, is to ask hard questions. Okay? For instance, have you considered all the risks? What's the succession plan, for instance? Or why do you want to invest in this project? These are real hard questions could be asked by a board. And that's exactly what these 6 leaders did for us, and each one embodies a core question that every leader, whether if you're running a dynasty or just a department, has to answer. Okay, so first we have Wang Mang here. Lived 2,000 years ago. I've called him the radical product manager. Why? Because Wang Mang look at the market, right? Look at China, and look at the society, and saw huge problems. Okay, what was it? He saw land inequality. He saw slavery. He saw economic instability. He saw that he thought he had solutions. He thought he had brilliant solutions, and the solutions looked suspiciously like something that was invented 100 years ago. Okay, keep that in mind. So his core question is that why do innovative strategies fail? He's a very talented guy, very innovative, but his dynasty only survived 15 years. Next, I brought the Huizong of Song dynasty. Lived about 1,000 years ago. I've called him the misplaced creative director. Okay, the man should have been a head of a Royal Academy of Arts. He had perfect taste in terms of arts. He invented a new type of calligraphy that is still considered the best kind of Chinese calligraphy until this very day. He painted masterpieces, and he was indeed, by any measure, a genius, an art genius. His core question is that what happens when skills don't match your position? Okay. Because Huizong was genius at art, not governance. And when you put a creative genius in charge of a military superpower, then it's a big problem. The results are beautiful right up until everything burns down. Next board member we have here is Wu Zetian, lived about 1,500 years ago. She was the only woman in China ruled as an emperor under her name. That's something very unique. I've called her the breakthrough female leader. Okay? But that's an understatement. Okay? She didn't just break the glass ceiling, she shattered one. She shattered the ceiling that was reinforced for thousands of years. Right? Women were excluded from politics, from Chinese politics during the Imperial time. The core question is that how does a leader establish authority when the system is specially designed to exclude them? Okay? Everything is working against you. Her answers are political, strategic, and psychological. Her answers are still relevant till this very day. Next, we have the Emperor Hongwu of Ming. He was, he lived about 600 years ago, and I call him the founder from scratch. All right, why is that? Because this guy starts from a peasant. He worked as a beggar. He didn't work as a beggar. He was a beggar. And then he was a monk, and then a soldier, and a general, and somehow after 16 years of struggle, he became the emperor of China. So the core question here is that how could a startup founder shape the organizational culture? Okay, he's a brilliant guy, but he failed spectacularly when he tried to handle the dynasty to his sons. And then second to last, we have Emperor Qianlong of Qin, who lived about 300 years. He is the peak era successor. So when Qianlong took power, China was already very formidable, was very powerful, and very stable. His only job was to keep it. Right? Keep it as prosperous as prosperous as he can. And for decades, he did. China under Qianlong's rule was the largest economy back then. But the core question is that what is the innovator's dilemma for a successor? Okay, because Qianlong's China looked perfect from surface, but there are problems, vulnerabilities. A lot of them were hidden. And finally, we have Emperor Wen of Sui, who lived about a bit more than 1,400 years from now, and his role is the underrated founder. Okay, when we have a startup, think of, for instance, when someone started a company, right? Very often, the founder would sell this successful startup after third year, after fifth year, like what Elon Musk did with all of his previous business when he was younger. But when we celebrate the success of this company on the 50th year, we often don't think about the founder. Right? This person is largely neglected. So the core question for Emperor's Way of Sui is that what legacy do underrated founders have left behind? So every single one of them faced a version of the same fundamental challenge. The challenge is, how do I keep this thing going? Okay, how do I keep it as is? Wang Mang tried to save society through reforms. He failed. Huizong tried to create beauty. Didn't end up so well. Wu Zetian wanted to prove that she belonged to the society, and Hongwu wanted to protect what he has built. And Chen Dong wanted to preserve perfection, and Emperor Wen of Sui wanted to build in something that could last forever in the world. So, before we begin, one quick note. You know, these stories I'm telling tonight are from traditional Chinese history records, okay? Mostly the official dynasty records. And these were written by the scholar officials who worked for the next dynasty. So do you see a problem here? It means this history, some of them are not neutral. It's an inherent problem embedded in all history. And this means that when they wrote this history, they have agendas. They want to make the previous dynasty look terrible. So when I tell you that Wang Mang is a villain, he's actually not. Okay? Just take it with a grain of salt. Historians will argue about what really happened, and that's part of the fun. Okay? So we are not here for the absolute truth because, you know, history, not all of them are true. We are here for the useful truth, right? What could benefit us as leaders, as managers. Okay? Are you superintendent? Go. All right, so we can start with our radical product manager, Wang Mang. So here is a map of Chinese history from the first dynasty. Of course, before this we had something else we called cultures, right? And the Wang Mang's dynasty was, okay, it's a bit hard. So Han Dynasty is the place, it's a dynasty where they started the Silk Road, okay? And Wang Mang lived in the end of the Western Han Dynasty. He usurped the throne. So he actually broke Han Dynasty into West Han and East Han. Okay, so that's the context of his dynasty. So here it is, the Wang Mang, the emperor who makes people on the internet asks, is this guy a time traveler? Okay, and honestly, looking at some of his policies, you can see why people wonder. He ruled China for about 15 years, from 9 to 23 CE, long before I was born. So in that short period of time, he introduced the ideas that would not appear again in China for about 2,000 years. But here's the catch, he failed. Okay? He failed completely, he failed miserably. His dynasty barely lasted a decade and a half, and he died in a very, very violent way. His reforms were reversed, and for most Chinese history, he has been viewed as a villain or a fool. So what happened here? How can someone with such brilliant ideas fail so badly? So that's the question you keep in mind for this section. First, let's understand who Wang Mang was. He wasn't born an emperor. Okay? He does not have the imperial bloodline. He came from a powerful family. His aunt was the empress dowager. But Wang Mang built his reputation through, performing, making himself look like too good to be true. It's classic move. He refused honors. He was very frugal. He gave away most of his wealth and lived very modestly. And he acted like a perfect Confucian official. So people around the emperor begged the emperor to promote Wang Mang. Right? He's such a nice guy. He's the saint. Please promote him. So people praised him. And when the time was really right, he just took the throne. So he didn't inherit the throne. He didn't fight for it. He usurped it. he take the power from the Han Dynasty that he was actually supposed to serve. Okay, so this is the context. And here's the interesting, he genuinely believed what he did was the right thing. He thought he had, the Han Dynasty had lost the mandate of heaven. That's what he believed. He thought he could build a much better society, and to do that, what he did is look backwards. Okay? So, next, here's the paradox that explains everything about Wang Mang, and look at the text in the box says, implemented radical social, implemented radical social reforms in the name of restoring the ancient Zhou dynasty practices. Think about that. He was a radical reformer who claims to be a conservative restorer. He wanted to transform societies completely and fundamentally by going back to the dynasties that 1,000 years ago, trying to reverse history. It's like a CEO of today saying that starting from tomorrow, we are going to adopt the management practices from 1950s, and for sure we will dominate the market. It just does not quite add up, right? But for Wang Mang, this was sincere. He studied those ancient texts, especially The Rise of Zhou, a book describing the ideal government of a legendary dynasty happened 1,000 years ago. He believed that if he could recreate the system, the society for his time would be really perfect. So which brings us back to the time traveler idea. So now it's not entirely a joke, and I'm going to tell you why. In 1950s, archaeologists found, of course in China, found that something from the tomb of Wang Mang's era, not his. He did not have a tomb, he was killed. It was a set of bronze calipers up there, okay? Does it look familiar? Right? Because they are almost identical to the vernier caliper you can get today in Armitages or Sanuque, right? The same basic design, the same measurement, same sliding mechanism. It functions in exactly the same way. But, however, of course, it happened 2,000 years before it got reinvented again. But of course, Wang Mang himself was not responsible for the innovation of this caliper. But it says that his system or his thinking somehow encouraged it. Okay, without his reform, science, people would not have the right atmosphere to invent this. So, but for Wang Mang's political innovations, it did not work as good as his calipers. So look back at what Wang Mang actually tried to do. 4 policies, 4 ideas that would have made him a hero if it worked. And that makes them fascinating, even though they didn't. So first, it's the Wang Tian system. Wang Tian system literally means, Wang Tian really means the king's field, right? The king's land. Wang Mang nationalized all land, took it away from the wealthy landowners, and redistributed to all the people. So each household now have a plot of land to work on. It sounds really like land reform, and it's been tried many times in the years, thousands of years later, usually by revolutions or with guns, but Wang Mang did it with an imperial royal decree. But you can think about a scale. In one stroke, he told every wealthy families in China saying that your land is no longer yours. We are giving it to the people who actually needs to work on it. Because before that, noblemen, they had so much land, and many of their land are wasted. Okay. Second, price controls. The government stabilized the price of agricultural products, the grains. It's a basic agricultural policy of today, but in 2,000 years ago, it was revolutionary. Imagine if the government guaranteed that the price of the agricultural product will not rise during a famine and not decrease during a good harvest year. Okay? Therefore, that for peasants living on the edge of survival, it was a life or death situation for them. Really, for peasants, it looked really good. Third, the abolition of slavery. He abolished slavery. He decreed that the private slaves, they called them private dependents, could no longer be bought or be sold. That's a rule. This was not a full emancipation, but it was rather a massive step towards it. In a society where elites' wealth back then were dependent on private slavery labors. And finally, the state loans. Okay, look at 10% interest rate. The government would lend money to peasants at 10% interest rate, and private lenders at the time charged 3 times more than that. The private lenders, they charge 30%. And sometimes even more. So think of it as a proto-microfinance program 2,000 years before Muhammad Yunus thought about it again. So here's a question. If you read the list, you see land reform, you see price stabilization, you see anti-slavery, you say that he offers credible, affordable credit to his citizens. You would think that he's actually a good reformer, right? A progressivist and someone who sees injustice and wants to fix it. Before I tell you what happened, you think about something. Okay, imagine you are the CEO of a large company. You look around, you see your employees are underpaid. You see that your suppliers are exploited, and your products are overpriced, and you think you have the best solution, you have a brilliant solution. You say that you would double the wage for your employees. You would source your suppliers ethically, and you would lower the price. You want to transform everything overnight. How do you think the board would see? How do you think your competitor would think? These people will sabotage you. Okay? They would whisper bad story behind your back, and if you push too hard, they would find a way to remove you, because you are you are harming their interest. Okay? The board cares about the profit, about the dividends, and you're doing this will lower their profit. Okay? So Wang Mang identified the real problem. He had real solutions on how did that work out. So we've seen Wang Mang's brilliant ideas: land reform, price control, ending slavery, affordable credit, and any ACEO today would be proud to have that vision. So why did it all collapse? We can look at 4 reasons. First, the market was not ready. Think about Wang Mang's, what he was asking. He wanted the richest, most powerful families in China to help him. And in the same time, they are giving away their lands because he feels that it's the right thing to do. So imagine that you are the tech company CEO, and some guy comes to you and says that starting from tomorrow, your company is now non-profit, and all profit goes to a charity. And you would fight. You would hide your money. You would lie. You'd find loopholes in the system. You would use this. And you would even sabotage the whole system, right? This is exactly what landowners did. These powerful landowners. They hid their land. They put their land under others' name. They registered or even registered in false names. They bribed officials to look the other way around. And this makes Wang Mang's reform only looking good on papers. So this is the first lesson. Timing matters. You can't have the right idea at the wrong moment, and it will just fail as surely as the wrong idea. And secondly, these people with power, they fight back. Okay? This irony, Wang Mang needed those people to implement his reforms. The local elites, the aristocrats, the landowners, the merchants, these were the people, very people that his policy is gonna harm. So, and he was asking to enforce these policies on themselves. Okay. So in business, we call this an agency problem. The people who are supposed to execute your strategy have their own interests, and your policies do not offer them an additional incentive to help them to carry out your orders. Okay? And third, frequent policy changes. He changed currencies 5 times in 15 years. Imagine if your government changed the money in your wallet every single 4 or 5 years. Right? 1 year this coin is valid, next year it's not. Creates chaos. And when you get a new coin, very quickly it gets replaced by another set of banknotes or coins. So what would you do? You would stop trusting the system. It's too chaotic. You would hoard some old coins and you would barter and you'd use everything except the official currency. Right? And that's exactly what happened during his time. Wang Mang was a thinker. He saw a problem and his instinct was to change the rules, but every time he changed the rules, he caused new problems, new things that needs to be fixed. So this is a very classic founder trap. When things go wrong, do you iterate or do you pivot? Okay, Wang Mang chose to pivot so many times that people stopped trusting him. So by the time of his end of his rule, people don't even know what the system is because it constantly changes all the time. And those people living thousands of kilometers away from the capital, information don't reach them. Failure number 4, the implementation gap. The system couldn't match his revolutionary ideas. This might be the most important point. Wang Mang had a very beautiful vision, a just society, a moral economy, but he had no reliable ways to make it all happen. His bureaucratics is very corrupt. The local officials were incompetent and they were hostile towards the local residents, the peasants. He had no real-time data on what he is actually governing. No one was telling him because everyone is confused. He has no real first-hand information. In business school, we teach this that vision without execution is hallucination. So Wang Mang was hallucinating a perfect word when really the real one, the physical one, was burning. He could decree anything he wanted, but a decree of his was only words on paper. So the management lesson here, the lesson that every leader, every single one of us needs to internalize is that innovation needs rhythm. Execution matters much more than good ideas. Wang Mang identified real problem, land inequality, slavery, economic problems, He saw them clearly. He had solutions, and those solutions in many cases were centuries ahead of his time. But he couldn't implement them. That's the problem. He moved too fast. He surrendered too many powerful people so that they stopped working for him. They stopped carrying out his orders, which only made things worse. So what happened to Mang Mang in the end is that in 23 CE, there was a massive peasant revolution, and it was fueled by the chaos his reforms had created. Right? He thought that his policy would benefit the peasants, but the peasants in the end did not actually receive the benefit. The peasants were hurt. So there was a revolution. He was killed in his palace, died violently, and the dynasty went back to the original Han dynasty's heirs. So his 15 years actually separated 470 years of Han dynasty into two pieces. Okay. So vision is cheap, execution is everything. Okay. So here is a detailed photography of that clipper, and we can see there are some quite nice markings and some Chinese ancient called 小篆 characters. Okay, now we're gonna talk about another dynasty, the Song dynasty. Okay, so we are here. This is about 1,000 years ago. So after Wang Mang, a radical reformer who moved too fast and threatened too many people, let me introduce a very different kind of ruler. The Emperor Huizong of Song ruled from 1100 to 1126. Okay, Wang Mang makes you think that time traveler, and Huizong makes you think that maybe this is what happens if Da Vinci has a problem. Because Huizong was, by any measure, a brilliant artist in Chinese history. He painted, he wrote poetry, he invented a new calligraphy called slender gold. He founded art academy. He mentored great painters. And his reign produced more than the most beautiful art in China than any other emperors, rulers. But there's one problem. The problem is that he is the emperor. While he was creating all this beautiful stuff, the world, his emperor, was collapsing around him. So this line here says it perfectly. A gifted artist whom fate made him an emperor. And honestly, that might be the saddest job description in history. So we can look at his resume, the artistic resume, because there's nothing to look at for his imperial emperor resume. First, the slender gold calligraphy. He invented this by himself. Okay. Slender gold. It's thin. The strokes are thin. It's sharp. It's elegant, like gold wire stretched across the paper. It's delicate but very strong. It's refined but very powerful. That's a conclusion from what people say about his font. 1,000 years later, people still study this calligraphy, this font, slender gold. And people still fail. No one could reproduce this slender gold calligraphy. Okay? So imagine inventing a font, and still people, after millennium, still try to imitate, including my wife. Tonight, one of the boss here, I told her about the slender gold. She said, "Oh, that's my favorite calligraphy," and she sometimes tried to imitate, but no one could. Or maybe she could, I don't know. She didn't tell me. So second, he mentored Zhang Zeduan. Zhang Zeduan is a painter along the river during the Qingming festival. It's the most famous painting in Chinese history, the Qingming Shanghedu. If you say this is number 2, no other paint could say it's the top. This is the most famous period. So he mentored this painter. He gave him space. He gave him money. He funded him, because you cannot draw a 6 meter long I will show later, a painting just by yourself, right? You need money, you need space, you need someone to support, you need people to serve you, right? So he created the perfect space for this perfect atmosphere situation for Zhang Zuoduan to create this. And Zhang Zuoduan created because Huizong supported him, funded him, and gave him some space. And without Huizong, this masterpiece would never exist. Okay. Thirdly, he founded the Xuanhe Painting Academy. Before Huizong, artists were only craftsmen. Okay, they are important, but Huizong gave them, for the first time in Chinese history, gave them status. So afterwards, artists are respected. They have a social status. Okay, so he created an entire ecosystem for arts to flourish. He was a patron, he was a promoter, he was the practitioner, all in one. And lastly, he compiled the Xuanhe catalogs. It's a comprehensive collection of calligraphy and painting, and basically he created the authoritative record of Chinese art up until his time. Another achievement. He documented thousands of works. He documented thousands of artists. So without Huizong, we would have lost so many names, so many painting and calligraphy styles that could have just vanished in history. So if you read the list, the Slender Gold, the Zhang Zuoduan, the Academy, the catalogs, you would see that this guy is an artistic genius, right? A man who shaped the Chinese art for a millennium. So why isn't this guy remembered that way? Because Huizong was painting his emperor, while he was painting his country's empire was dying. And the skills that made him a great artist also made him a terrible emperor. And the outcome was very devastating. In 1126, the Jin army, the very powerful army Huizong himself helped to create, marched onto the Song capital, Kaifeng, and in panic, Huizong abdicated. He transferred the emperorship to his son in distress. So along with his son, the city fell, and he was captured. He was sent 1,000 kilometers north to the nowadays Manchu region. And imagine this guy who had beautiful pavilions, right? Who sleeps in silk and now walks in cold weather in mud all the way to a cold room. And he died in the Jin territory after 9 years. But still, during his time in Jin, on the way to the Jin territory, he still wrote many poems that are still remembered today. Like remorse, express his remorse, express the feeling of losing a country. Okay, so here's the irony. Huizong's art survived. We still study his calligraphy. We still admire his paintings. We still read catalogs that he compiled, and his empire did not. The Northern Song fell, millions died, and the Gold Age ended. So the North Song became South Song, which is merely half size of North Song. And because he was the emperor, his art is remembered in the shadow of his failure. And the man who created slender gold calligraphy is also a man who lost his empire, and we cannot separate them. When we think about Huizong, we think about both things. Okay. So here's a question, hard one. How do you know when you are in the wrong role? How do you know when your passion is becoming actually a liability? Because here's the thing about Huizong, he was not lazy, he was not stupid, he was not evil, he was just in love with the wrong thing, in a wrong position, and his thing that he loved kind of destroyed everything he owned. Okay, I'm gonna speed up a little bit. Okay, so we've seen Huizong's artistic genius, the standard gold calligraphy, the academy he founded, and the masterpiece he inspired, and we see this very sad truth: a gifted artist who fate made him an emperor. So this is what we call in business a skill mismatch. It's one of the most common and most dangerous problems in any organizations. You see that some programmers, when they got promoted into VPs, and they're still obsessed with coding every day, not about managing the company. And some salesperson got promoted and still thinking about how to maintain this micro relationship with the customers. Okay, they are put in a wrong position. It's called a skill mismatch. So Huizong is the ultimate case study. He was a genius at art, but his job was not about art. His job was about governing, and his skills made him a great at one, but made him terrible at the most important one. So he trusted corrupted officials like Cai Jing. So who is Cai Jing? He's a very brilliant, charismatic, educated person who tells Huizong that just focus on your art and I can take care of everything else for you. So Huizong had no idea what's going on while Cai Jing embezzled on a tax fund. He were being really harsh on the peasants. So, and this Cai Jing built his own power base. So Cai Jing succeeded because he told Huizong that what he wanted to hear. All managers, all bosses have this kind of person around them. So the question is, you need to distinguish who is who, like what kind of people. When they tell you stories, you need to be diligent. Misplaced focus, number 2 failure. And I can tell you about this garden. It's called Genyue. Genyue was Huizong's masterpiece. It's a massive artificial mountain built in his garden with rocks he collected from all over China, and exotic trees and very exotic animals. He wanted to create a perfect microcosm of nature, and where he could paint and write poems. But it needs lots of money. It needs lots of forced labors. It took years. It cost millions and required thousands of peasants to come to work. So while Huizong was organizing these rocks, his officials were starting to destroy the empire. So what you don't do is as much as matter as what you actually do. Okay. So his people back then didn't need those beautiful paintings. They need food, they need safety, they need justice, and none of these were provided by Huizong. Last failure, he allied with Jin dynasty to destroy the Liao dynasty. Liao was North Song's old enemy, right? And he fostered the Jin dynasty, the new uprising, to destroy Liao. But the Jin dynasty was also very ambitious. So when Liao was finally destroyed, Jin comes to Song and sees like beautiful, gorgeous, extravagant, wealthy nation. And you should not be surprised if the Jin dynasty decided to invade North Song. So you can notice the pattern here. 3 failures, 1 root. Huizong was governing the way he was painting. He hired Cai Jing the way, like how he chose a brush, because it felt right, not because it's right for the job. And he focused on the art the way he focused on the painting, very immersed, very passionate, very oblivious to everything else. And he made alliances the way he would compose a poem, right? Looking for elegant solutions, not understanding what is that the war itself is not poetry. And that brings us to the lesson. Let professionals do their job. CEOs can not only do what they enjoy, skill mismatch can be disastrous for any organization. If Huizong lived today, where would he be? He would be in he would not be in a boardroom. For sure, he could be in an art school in Paris, a famous artist in New York, or working in an art museum, right? But the worst place he could be is sitting on a throne. So this is slender gold. Okay, I don't know why. For me, I mean, like I'm not. I write very badly, but I mean, I guess I can appreciate part. And then this is the river during the Qingming festival, the Qingming Shanghedu, right? It's 5.8 meters long. Okay. And it's somewhere in Beijing National Museum. And this is Genyue. It's of course destroyed when the Jin army came, but this is how people imagine it would have been. Okay, this garden rocks and exotic trees and animals. So now next we are talking about Wu Zetian. She, like Wang Mang, she also broke the Tang Dynasty, one of the most powerful dynasties in Chinese history, into two parts. But Tang did not, unlike Han, where this East Han and West Han and East Han, in Tang Dynasty there's no West Han and East Han, because he still peacefully handed the throne back to the original imperial family. So, after two men failed, one moved too fast, one focused on one thing, I can introduce you a leader who actually did everything right against all odds. So, she is the only female emperor in China. Okay? Think about that for a moment. China has 1,000 years of imperial history, over 500 emperors. Half of them are buried in my city, hometown. And only one woman ever ruled under her real name. Right? That's not because women were incapable in China. It was because the system designed specifically to exclude them, so that every institution, every law, every official, every cultural norm said emperor has to be man, and it's just how it is. And Wu Zetian looked at the system and said, watch me. So this line captured perfectly. In a male-dominated system, she rose to the pinnacle of power through political talent. Not through beauty, not through manipulation, not through luck, but through talent, political talent, diligence. And that's important to emphasize because there are lots of myths about Wu Zetian that people write after her. Stories that reduced her stereotype, saying that she rose to power because of seductress, that she was a villain, she was a schemer. Those stories exist because people just couldn't accept that a female became the emperor of China. So we can set aside the myths, we can look at what actually she did, what results she delivered. So how did she get here? Let's follow the path. At age 14, she became a low-ranking concubine of Emperor Taizong, the first emperor of Tang Dynasty. But when Taizong died, she was forced to go become a monk in a temple. However, Taizong's son Gaozong, during his reign, Gaozong kind of, she kept in touch using letters with Gaozong. So Gaozong liked her, and she went back. He went to the temple and picked her to the imperial palace. And eventually, Wu Zetian became the empress. And because Gaozong was physically ill, okay, he was not healthy. He had, I think, something related to high blood pressure or something. So they ruled together, Wu Zetian and Taizong. They called them two sages, right? A country having two rulers. And eventually, when Gaozong died, she put their son into power, and then she took her son out of power, and then she, through her political geniuses, she became the emperor of China. Okay. And once she had the power, what did she do? We can look at her records. First, she weakened the aristocracy and opened opportunities for commoners. Right? Before Wu Zetian, the most powerful position in government were dominated by small groups, clients of those predefined people, of noble families only. But, and the inherent power, they protect each other because they share a common interest. They didn't have to prove anything. They can be a moron and still become a high-tier, high-ranked official. So Wu Zetian changed that. She actively promoted people from humble grounds, people with only who's using merit system, right? If you're qualified, you get a job. And she broke the monopoly of these old families. This is a very classic leadership move, is that diversify your talent pool. If you're only selecting from those clans, you only have a limited, finite amount of people you can choose. But if selecting from the entire country, you have millions to choose from. Okay. Secondly, she improved the imperial examination and created palace exam system. So the exam had existed before, but Wu Zetian made them better. She introduced a new level, the palace examination, where she personally interviewed these top the exam takers who scored the highest. She wanted to see if they are really truly capable or not. So imagine that the only woman ever held this title, sitting in judgment of the brightest minds in the country and asking them questions, testing their skills, and then this sent a powerful message to the entire nation, is that excellence matters, connections don't, not anymore. Thirdly, she stabilized the border and recovered the four garrisons of Anxi. That's a very brilliant move, but how they strategically acquired them, but it's kind of a long story. So yes, she secured the border, that's the bottom line. Fourth, she laid the groundwork for the Kaiyuan Golden Age follows her ruling. The reign after her, the Emperor Xuanzong, was the absolute pinnacle of Chinese history, the Kaiyuan Shengshi. But it didn't happen only because of the Xuanzong later on. It was that Wu Zetian, she laid the foundation for that peak. Okay? And the last one, she lowered taxes, encouraged land reclamation. She cared about whether ordinary people had enough to eat, because she knew that if the hungry people don't make a stable empire. So finally, she supported Buddhism and encouraged poets. Right? She supported these poets, so that she even invited monks from India, from Central Asia, to write poems in her empire. Okay, so so now we look at how she did it. Okay, what were her strategy? What we learn from her playbook? First of all, let the results speak. Promote exams, right? Develop economy, prove capabilities through outcomes. Think about her situation. Every day she walks into a room where men all believes that deeply and sincerely believe that women could not lead, that women were irrational, they are emotional, they are unfit to rule a huge, great power. And how do you convince people like that? You deliver results. Okay? You don't complain, you just deliver. Let the hard evidence talk. Wu Zetian made sure that under her rule, the exams were fair, the economies were growing, and the borders were secure. She gave people evidence that people cannot argue about. And here's the saying in business: results get attention, great results get respect, and Wu Zetian understood that just perfectly. Secondly, she built a personal brand. All right. She chose the reign title heavily bestowed to legitimize her rule. She invited, okay, so heavily bestowed, she created this herself. It's not a brand, it's a slogan. Right? It psychologically makes people think that she is the righteous ruler. So she built temples. She asked those high respected monks to find ancient scripts that says that China will have a female leader at some point in history, right? Because this is about you have to control your own narrative. If you don't develop your narrative, someone else will, and for sure you will not like that narrative, right? You have to control it. And lastly, second to last, she selected capable ministers. There's one very important official under his rule is Di Renjie. He is the most famous official in the Chinese history, and there were tons of TV shows about him. However, he served in the previous ruler, the Gaozong, and she challenged Wu Zetian on many occasions. Even when Wu Zetian wanted to, to see if she should hand the throne to her son, her nephew, which is her bloodline, or to the son he had with Gaozong. She was clinging to her nephew, but Di Renjie actually challenged her on multiple occasions. So the thing is here that in management, having an open heart, open-minded to hire someone who's more capable than yourself. That's very important as well. And finally, my favorite is that she had a swordless stele. So near her tomb, Wu Zetian erected a massive stone stele, and it's a monument. It's like a tall stone. I will show you the photo later. And it's completely blank. There's no written words on it, and not a single character. For centuries, people have guessed why was it unfinished? Was it like washed off? Was it destroyed? Was it oxidized? But no, scholars later on found that it was intentional. Wu Zetian, at the end of her life, looked at her legacy and said that I'm not going to tell you a thing about myself. You decide what kind of person I am. Think about the confidence that takes. Most leaders, most peoples, we write memoirs. We want people to remember our story, right? We build libraries under our names, and we lobby for statues for ourselves. But Wu Zetian left a blank stone that she trusted history, trusted that her achievement would eventually speak on her behalf. And here's the beautiful irony: because the stele is blank, every generation talks about it. When I was 3, I knew about this blank stele, and every visitor wondered, every historian speculates that the most famous stele in China is precisely because it's blank. Okay. And here's the management lesson. Though the leadership, the core of problem solving, you have to work harder to prove the results to break this stereotype. And this is that blank stone stele. It's like 40 kilometers from where I live in my hometown. Empty, absolutely empty. Nothing was written on it. And now we're gonna talk about the Ming Dynasty. It's about 600 years from now on. It's that beggar emperor. So after the Emperor Hongwu, his real name is Zhu Yuanzhang. So he is the founder from scratch. And why? Look at this trajectory. So he starts from a convert, a monk, become beggar, become a soldier, and become general, and then become emperor. All these things happened in 16 years. It's not a career path, it's actually a legend, and I can give you key facts because they really matter. When he was 17, a massive famine swept throughout the central part of China. His mother died, his father died, his brother died. He was the only one who survived in his family. And after burying his family with borrowed money, he became a beggar. Surprise. Wandering from village to village and sleeping in temples. Okay. Eating whatever people could give him. He joined a rebel group at age 25, and by age 41, he became the emperor of China. And think about that, 16 years for any anonymous soldier to the ruler of the most powerful on earth at the moment. That's faster than almost every people gets promoted in the management chain. Okay, so how did he do it? What made his particular beggar didn't die like any other anonymous beggar? So first, stay grounded. Okay, he understood that ordinary people are suffering because he's from the grassroots. When he became emperor, he didn't forget he implemented tax relief for peasants. He resettled displaced families. He knew what policies would actually help because he has been on the receiving side of those bad policies when he was a teenager. And this is a founder's advantage. Founder who lived in the customer's pain designs better, right? Because you really understand, you really have that mentality. Homewood's customers were peasants, and these policies he designed actually worked for those peasants. And secondly, work ethic. He works more than 17 hours a day, just like a Chinese. So Homewood trusted no one. Okay, and we will talk about that. It's also a dark side in that moment. So in the early days, this paranoia meant that he outworked everyone. He read every memorial. He tracked every grain of the tax rise. He knew that the details of this empire better than any other official. If you ever worked with a founder with anywhere who answers, who answers your phone calls, your emails at 2 a.m., right? So this is who Homewood is. Third, pragmatic. Policies designed by him really addressed the real pain points of peasants, and he encouraged agriculture. He didn't have an ideology. He didn't care about being fancy. He cared about if this policy actually works. And if a policy helps peasants to grow more food, he would adopt it. If not, he would abolish it. So this quality is actually rarer than you think, because most leaders love with their own ideas, but Homewood here, he fell in love with the results. But okay, we'll have to mention that for the next slide, that these very qualities help him to build an empire, actually almost destroyed it. So we've seen a miracle. The beggar became the emperor, right? The founder who built the emperor from absolutely nothing. But every miracle has a price, and Homewood's price was that paid by people around him. He ruled in a very, very gruesome way. And he has 3 founders' challenges. First, deep insecurity. He killed many merit officials. There's Hu Wenyong case, there's Lan Yu case. These are all paranoia from his humble origins, because these cases are not small. First, the Hu Wenyong case happened in 1380. Hu was the prime minister, and he was accused of forming a coup against Zhu, and Hong had him executed, and he kept going, and anyone connected to Hu was executed, and anyone might have known about this were executed. So eventually, estimates says that 30,000 people were killed. And the second Lan Yu case happened in 1393. Lan was a brilliant general who helped conquer China to defeat the previous Yuan dynasty. He was accused of treason, was executed, and again, purge expanded, and estimates 15,000 people have died. So, were these real plots? Maybe yes, maybe not, but remember that courts are dangerous places. And here's what happened psychologically. Because Hong would spend his teenage time, being kicked around, right, being ignored, and being betrayed, he sees that what officials had done to other people and to himself. So when he finally had the power, he couldn't believe anyone would be loyal because he saw betrayal everywhere before he became emperor. So this is founder's trauma. When you survive by trusting no one, you don't know how to stop or when to stop. Secondly, he abolished the over-centralization. He abolished the position of prime minister, which is a position that was in place in China for over 1,500 years. And before the prime ministers were top officials who helped the emperor with bureaucratics, okay, carry out orders, making day-to-day decisions, and give emperor a breathing room. Okay, but Hongwu said, I don't need this. So he abolished this position permanently because he didn't trust anyone. So for the rest of Ming Dynasty, over nearly 300 years, there were no prime minister helping the emperor. So that forced him to work 16 hours a day. Okay? But he had energy because he's the man who survived from famine, who carried out the war against the Yuan dynasty. But think about it. What about his successors who were born in a palace, who were raised by eunuchs, who had abundant, unlimited amount of delicious food, right? They probably don't have that same kind of energy to a certain extent as Hongwu. Therefore, it's a classic founder mistake. You design the organization for yourself, but not for the people who come after you. You yourself, you think you are a very strong person, you can handle everything, but what about next person? Okay? You assume that everyone will have your drive, your paranoia, and your stamina, but they actually don't. So this system protect his dynasty. He's trying to use this system protect his dynasty, but actually later on it make it weaker. Number three, extreme anti-corruption. Okay, because he sees in his childhood that how corrupt the officials were. Even during his regime, even the officials, like the corruption case was like equivalent, for instance, 1,000 euros would be imprisoned, that official, or even executed. But in the meantime, the salary for officials were not high. So that creates a huge problem. So in theory, yes, it reduced corruption for a while, but it also meant that officials had to live in terror. They don't have incentive to work anymore. And when people are afraid to act, afraid to carry their duty, the system simply stops working. So here's the paradox. Hongwu's strength became his weakness. The insecurity kept him alive as a beggar, made him a paranoid as an emperor, and his work ethic that built the empire made him unable to delegate, right? You need to delegate your power at appropriate time. You cannot centralize control all powers, because your successor will not. And the hatred of injustice motivated him to become a terror, okay? Gruesome person. So this brings us to the lesson. It's one of the hardest lessons for any founder, is that founders must learn to let go. A skill that builds an organization is not a skill that sustains it. Builders fear downfalls and sustainers maintain them, and Hongwu never made that transition successfully. If the founder is too strong, the organization loses power to evolve. When you do everything yourself, no one learns. No one can learn anything from you. And your successors are helpless, your organization will become very fragile. And trust reduces organization costs because paranoia is very expensive. It requires surveillance, purges, and the constant vigilance. And trust is something that trust in capable people is actually cheaper in this case. but it requires some vulnerability. So this is what during Hongwu's time, his architecture style is the bell tower of my hometown, and that's the Dome Tower. It's very pretty. And the second to last dynasty, the Qing dynasty. Okay, that's pretty close to our time now, only 300 years ago. So Emperor of Qing, Emperor Qianlong of Qing ruled from 1735 to 1799. It was 64 years. He was the longest ruler, imperial ruler of all Chinese history. And when he took power, China was already wealthy and it was powerful, it was stable, and his job was not to build, just to sustain, right? So he steered the empire for 60 years, 64 years at its peak time. Think about that. Its peak. Under Qianlong, China was the largest economy in the world, and it's militarily dominated East Asia. The cities were more sophisticated than any capitals elsewhere, and the population was exploding. And he inherited a machine that was already running to some extent perfectly, and his challenge was just to keep it running. Okay? And for decades he did, but afterwards it changed. After his pass away, everything changed. So first, he pacified in military sphere. He pacified the Zunge region. It's a long-running conflict in Central Asia, and he expanded Chinese territory by over 10,000 square kilometers. So at the time, his empire was already the largest, and he just made it even larger. Second, for treasuries, he compiled China's largest book collection, the complete collection of these four treasuries. So think about it. All the books, anything written in your language, up until this time, were collected into a catalog. Okay, but there's also dark side here. So any books that criticize the Manchu rule, he destroyed. So it's not all very good. And thirdly, population growth. Under his reign, China's population, even 400 years ago, exceeded 300 million people, and the treasury was full. And that were some of his achievements. You think about the 300 million, it's like almost the entire population of the United States, but 400 years ago, or 500 years ago. Finally, the 6,000 trips to the Jiangnan region. Jiangnan region is in the southern part of China. It's very wealthy. He went there 6 times during his reign, not only to go have fun. He went there to tell the elites, noblemen, that I'm watching. The emperor is here. Though we are far by distance, but I still have full control over this region. Right? He tries to remind people about that. He wrote more than 40,000 poems. That's more than the entire Tang Dynasty had to produce. In Tang Dynasty, the golden age of Chinese poem maybe had 2,000, and Qianlong outperformed all of them. But is it good quality? No, it was quantity. Okay, it was if you read some of his poems, it's very stupid. Okay, and he covered all those paintings with his seals, like a teenager with an Instagram filter. Okay, I will show you some examples later. And for instance, most famous Chinese calligrapher called Wang Xizhi. It's like that Qingming Shanghedu, but in calligraphy. So the origin one copy is very elegant, very simple, very beautiful, but Qianlong's version is covered with all of his red seals. And he believed that his reign represents perfection, so he called him the perfect old man. Okay, the perfect son. Okay. Okay, so we have seen the glory, but the saying goes, the higher the monkey climbs, the more you see is behind. Okay? Qianlong's empire looked perfect from outside, but beneath the surface, problem multiplied. And because he believed that everything is perfect, he couldn't just see them. Problem number one, the literary inquisitions. Remember the 4 treasuries? He collected books, and he was also destroying them. So any texts criticized his dynasty were burned, destroyed. So scholars back then lived in fear, and if they write anything ambiguous, it could be executed. Okay? And if they quote the wrong poem, it's very dangerous. So this makes what happens when the best minds are afraid of speak, you have stagnation. Right? Qin's intellectual energy slowly died. Problem number 2, that he trusted one important official, very charming, very smart official called He Shen. He was the most corrupt official in the Chinese history. He owned about 30% of Qing's GDP and half of Beijing. He owned pawn shop, markets, shops, banks, everywhere. So that even though Qianlong's son, when he became emperor, the first thing he did is to execute He Shen. But it was already too late, because Qianlong and He Shen, this case tells everyone in the country that the emperor's favorites are immune from the law. Okay, so that fostered the corruption culture of the Qing dynasty. Problem number 3, the Mercantile mission in 1793. This was a fork in the road. Okay, Lord Mercantile arrived with 600 boxes of British goods, ship models, artillery models, globes, the clocks, everything. And they wanted a diplomatic relationship, like an embassy. But Qianlong's response was to King George III is that, I quote, "Our celestial empire possesses all things in abundance. We have no need for barbarian goods." So he just called the best country in Europe the barbarian goods. So that's how ignorant Qianlong was. So while Qianlong wrote this, James Watt in Europe was already inventing steam engines, and the Industrial Revolution was quietly transforming Europe at the moment. And 50 years later, the British ships with steam engines with huge guns forced China to open 5 of its ports. And the Opium War started, and it was a century of humiliation. All these things traces back to this one moment when he decided how to reply that letter. So we see the 3 problems. One source, the literary inquisition, desire to control, it silenced everyone to maintain perfection. And with this He Shen corrupt official, that Qianlong trusted his judgment over the system. And he thought he could spot corruption, but there were no checks and balances. And every problem came from one place, is that the belief that perfection has already been achieved. Okay, he believed everything was, there's nothing else to be improved in his empire. And the lesson here is that pride is the greatest enemy at peak times. The biggest risk is competitors. It's not in competitors, it's sometimes in your own arrogance. And the past success can be a future trap, right? Qianlong's confidence blinded him, and stability actually became stagnation. And lastly, innovators' dilemma applies beyond business, because success companies fail because they do everything right for the word that exists, and they cannot see the word coming up. And okay, so here's him, all his stamps, right? Beautiful painting, but look at what is it now? And this beautiful calligraphy, it looks, it lost its beautiful, the gorgeousness. So our last emperor was the Sui dynasty. It was a very important dynasty, but very short-lived, as for less than 3 decades. Okay, the Emperor Wen of Sui, his name was Yang Jian. He was the founder of the Sui dynasty. And he was an underrated ruler. Because of this man, this very frugal, very slightly henpecked emperor, he was afraid of his wife. created the template that every subsequent Chinese emperor dynasty would follow, okay, including the Tang dynasty, as everyone remembers. So the Sui dynasty only lasted about 38 years, and the Tang dynasty after that was absolutely glorious, and his system was inherited by Tang dynasty, but the credit went to the Tang rulers. So this is one of the histories in Chinese history, the greatest injustice, because of the shortness of the Sui dynasty, their stories were forgotten. And the Tang dynasty followed Sui, ruled for 300 years, used absolutely the same system. So let's look at what he actually did, 4 achievements that changed China forever. First is through merger and integration. He conquered the Chen dynasty and ended the warring state of China for 300 years. So imagine, nowadays, that's like Europe has been fighting since 1726. There's no unified France, there's no one Germany, everyone's fighting each other till this day, from 1726. That's how chaotic in China it was. Okay, he ended this. Emperor Wen, he unified China politically, administratively, and militarily. He created a single state for the first time in almost more than 3 centuries. And achievement number 2 is that he designed the 3 department and 6 minister system. It's used until 100 years ago. Okay. This was the bureaucratic structure of the Chinese government for more than 1,000 years. The 3 departments handled the flow of information and power. One drafted policy, one reviewed the policy, one implemented policy. So this was invented more than 1,000 years ago, before the separation of powers of who proposed Montesquieu. And the 6 ministers under the 3 departments works like any governmental organization today: personnel, finance, rights, war, justice, public work. Okay, most government has these 6 departments still nowadays. So if you work in a large organization, the structure should look familiar because it really works. And it creates specialization, it creates accountability, and it creates a clear line of authority. Next, talent strategy. He prototyped the Imperial examination system, merit over birth. Before, when the government position were mostly inherited. So if your father was the official, you probably would become the official. If your father was the peasant, you probably become still the peasant. But he changed that. So now the whole country adopts the merit system. The one who excels on the exam succeeds. And lastly, he also implemented cost control. Is that he was known for the personal frugality and the efficient resource management. Okay, he lived in a very cheap way. Okay? He was very frugal. He built his capital without any extravagant prevalence. He was very down to the root. And I promised one fun fact, and here it is. So once, remember, he's afraid of his wife. So once after his meetings in the palace, he came out. He saw one of his concubines. He talked to the concubine for a few minutes, and was noticed by his empress, his wife, Empress Dugu. And later on, Dugu killed this concubine, and Emperor Wen of Sui, he found out, and what he do, like any reasonable emperor, is that he rode on a horse and ran to the woods. And ministers, they were frightened. They rode on a horse and went to catch him, and they found him in the deep part of the forest, and he was like blushing and says, "I am the son of the heaven, yet I have no freedom." So that's how afraid of his wife he was. Okay, the last slide here, I'm going to be very concise. So I'm going to summarize this slide using one case. Do you know the open crawl? The AI open crawl, right? It's new. So what it is that like ChatGPT, like DeepSeek, they were the generative AI. They were your eyes. So OpenCloud is your hands. It's an application that helps you to send emails, to invest if you trust it, right? But the problem with OpenCloud is that it has no checks and balances. So I found out there's a website built a perfect system using Emperor 1 of Sway system, the 3 minister and 6 departments. One department of this imaginary department in OpenCloud structure drafts a proposal, another one reviews it, and then if it's reviewed okay, then it gets carried out by the last department. So even until this today, his system somehow still lives, even in the world of AI. All right, I guess that's last example I'll be giving out, and thank you very much for your attention. Any questions?
So which one of